Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking about different holes in the skull that you're going to be required to know. Again, if you look at your lab practical list, it gives you the bone in bold that you need to know, and then there are some markings underneath the bone that you are required to know. The markings are indented. So for example, here on the frontal bone, there are 3 different markings that you're required to know. And a marking is just an area of interest on the bone. So it might be some type of anatomical landmark, it might be a hole that we're wanting you to know about, or some kind of process or impression in the bone. You can see that on the parietal bones, you don't have any additional markings that you're required to know for this class. So I'm going to turn the skull around so we can discuss the holes that are mostly on the sphenoid bone, but partially also on the occipital bone. So I'm going to tell you a story to help you remember all these different holes that are in here. And the story is about a cowboy named Ross. And Ross is going to sit right here. So remember, this is the Sella turcica. And right in front of the Sella turcica is a little area that looks exactly like a saddle. And since Ross is a cowboy, he's going to sit in the saddle and he's going to put his legs down on either side. Now, something to know about Ross is he is blind. So he needs his horse to show him the way. And he holds the reins and the horse will show him the way because Ross can't see it himself. So these 2 holes going through the bone are called the optic foramen. Sometimes you'll see people call them the optic canals. But they go through the bone, through the sphenoid bone, into the back of the eye socket. And I think you can kind of see the light right there where the hole is coming through. That is the optic foramen. Right there, that's the small part. These large slits in the back of the eye, just lateral to the optic foramen, is called the superior orbital fissure. So it's superior, so it's higher up, it's in the back of the orbit, and it's a big opening. So superior orbital fissure, and the inferior orbital fissures are at the bottom here. Okay, so we have Ross. He's sitting in his saddle and he's holding the reins, and the reins are going through the optic foramen. Now, when Ross sits, he has his legs down on either side of the saddle. And I think you can see it coming through here. I'm going to put my pencil through the other way. Coming through here, you have the foramen lacerum. And think of lacerum, L for leg, because this is where the legs would go. They would go through these 2 holes. So that's the foramen lacerum, right on either side of the saddle. Now we have 3 other little tiny holes in here that we need to remember. We have the foramen rotundum. The foramen rotundum is this round hole right here, just below the superior orbital fissure. Somebody's printing. How many pages is this? Just 2 pages? Okay. All right, now it's all right. So this is the foramen rotundum on either side. Then we have something called the foramen ovale, and this is this oval shaped circle on either side. Foramen ovale. And then the teeny tiny one, the foramen spinosum, and that's this little small circle. So I remember them as round, R for rotundum, ovale, oval, and spinosum, S for small. And it also spells Ross, R-O-S. So if you remember Ross the Cowboy, you should remember these 3 holes. Remember his legs, L for lacerum, go into those holes, and the optic foramen go forward into the eyes. So 2 other things to show you here. Right lateral, just lateral to the foramen lacerum, is going to be the carotid foramen. This is the hole that your carotid arteries go through when they're bringing oxygenated blood from the heart to the brain. So there's one on this side and there's one on that side. So it's just lateral to the foramen lacerum. And again, it's still within the sphenoid bone. So all of these holes that we've talked about are all within the sphenoid bone. In the occipital bone, of course, you have the foramen magnum, and you also have the jugular foramen. And that would be this hole here and over there. And again, the jugular veins take deoxygenated blood from the brain and bring it back to the circulatory system, back to the heart in the jugular veins. So you would see the jugular foramen here and here. Carotid foramen is more anterior and sits within the sphenoid bone, this bat-shaped bone up here. That's pretty much it for the holes that you are required to know in the cranium. See you in class.